Dad said. Your brother deserves the company. So I let them infringe on my patents until they begged. Hi, I'm Gavin, 34, and the moment my father told me, your brother deserves the family business. You just don't have what it takes. I agreed completely. Because what I had instead were the patent rights to every single product that business sold. Funny how fast I developed what it takes after that. Let's rewind. For 10 years, I was the lead product engineer at my family's manufacturing company, Thornwell Dynamics. We made industrial automation gear conveyor components, sorting arms, precision mounts. Not exactly sexy tech, but critical stuff for factories. The kind of things that keep production moving and profits flowing. My dad, Warren Thornwell, built the business from a single lathe in a shed to a $5 million a year operation with 90 employees. Real Rust Belt, blue-collar dream. Except he still thought like a guy in a shed, especially when it came to innovation and IP law. And then there was my brother, Darren. 4 years younger, business degree from Michigan State, LinkedIn poster child. He was always the face of the future. Groomed for leadership, invited to client dinners, quoted in the newsletter. While I was under fluorescent lights prototyping dampening mounts, Darren was shaking hands and promising synergy. I was fine with that. I like being behind the scenes. I don't need a spotlight, I need a soldering station, a strong cup of coffee, and time to think. But the funny thing is, while Darren was busy networking, I was revolutionizing our product line. Over a decade, I designed 42 products from scratch. Modular systems, smart sensors, emergency shutoffs, AI-assisted lubrication systems, you name it. I didn't just tweak old designs. I created brand new machines that solved problems our clients didn't even know they had yet. And because Dad refused to believe in patents, said they were just expensive paperwork, I quietly filed them myself. Every product, every innovation, patented under my name. I paid the fees. I read every clause. I became my own legal department. I even told them I was doing it, over dinner, at holidays, in the shop. They just smiled and moved on like it was cute that the engineer was playing businessman. The employment contract Dad gave me when I joined? Some free boilerplate he printed offline. No IP clause. Nothing binding. I didn't push back. I was family. We were building something together. And then came the Sunday announcement. Family dinner, formal tone, big reveal, Dad stepping down. Effective immediately, Darren's the new CEO. My title? Unchanged. My reaction? Calm. Collected. I smiled and said, You're right. I don't have what it takes to run the business. And no one noticed the way I said it. Not then. But they were about to. So Monday morning, I walked into Thornwell Dynamics like I always did, coffee in hand, safety glasses on, no drama. Meanwhile, Darren was already nesting in Dad's old office. He'd replaced the metal desk with some glass monolith, had a fresh coat of paint slapped on the walls, and hung up a framed quote that read, Leadership is earned, not given. I snorted when I saw it. He'd even installed a $1,200 espresso machine. The guy who used to ask me what a torque wrench was now drinking single-origin Guatemalan roast while plotting strategic initiatives. But I wasn't mad. Not yet. I just went down to the engineering bay and started pulling files. Took me 3 days to fully cross-reference our product catalog with my patents. 42 designs in use. 36 still in active production. 33 making up nearly 80% of company revenue. I color-coded everything, which machines, which factories, which client contracts. It was all me. My designs. My IP. My bloodshot eyes and caffeinated sketches. Dad's company was making its money off the stuff I built, and none of it was licensed. Because we never thought we'd need to. Until they decided I was just a cog in the machine. And gave the whole factory to Darren. So I called a lawyer. Quietly. Found a firm in Cincinnati that specialized in patent enforcement. Sent them every patent number, every invoice, every signed delivery order using my tech. 2 days later, they said the same thing. You own all of it. And they're infringing. Badly. I drafted a licensing agreement. Standard. Polite. Professional. 12% of gross revenue on any product using my patents. Reasonable by every industry standard. I even left a clause for negotiation and a 30-day grace period before enforcement. Then I printed 3 copies. 1 for Darren. 1 for Dad. And 1 for the company attorney. Mailed them all certified. Let the countdown begin. The fallout hit on day 4. Darren stormed into the workshop holding the licensing agreement like it was a death certificate. His face was the color of boiled ham, forehead vein bulging like it was about to burst. He slammed the folder on my workbench and snapped. "What the hell is this?" I didn't even look up. "A licensing agreement. For my patents." "Your patents? Gavin, these are company products." "Actually," I said very calmly, "they're products I designed. Patented under my name. Filed with my own money. All legally mine. Check the USPTO database." He blinked like he just tasted metal. "You designed these while working here. That means they belong to Thornwell." I reached into a drawer, pulled out the employment contract Dad had me sign a decade ago, the 5-page template with typos and no mention of intellectual property. No IP clause. No assignment of rights. "You want to try this in court? Be my guest." He sputtered something about betrayal, and family, and extortion. I stayed silent. When you hold all the leverage, silence hits harder than shouting. Then came the golden line. "Dad's going to hear about this." "He already has." I sent him a copy on Monday. Certified mail. For the first time, Darren shut up. 2 hours later, Dad showed up in the shop looking deflated. Smaller than I remembered. The heart condition was real. So was the disappointment painted across his face. He didn't speak right away. We sat in the break room while he rubbed his temples. "Gavin, what are you doing?" "Protecting my work." "You built those products for the company." "No. I built them while working at the company. There's a difference. You knew we couldn't afford licensing fees. You knew that. And you knew you were building the company on my IP. And you gave it all to Darren." The room got cold. He sighed. "How much?" 12% of gross revenue from patented products. Comes out to about 9% of total revenue. You'll still be profitable. Just not lavish. You're punishing us. I'm being fair. For once. And then he said the quiet part out loud. "I thought we were family. You made me an employee. Now treat me like one." He left without another word. By Friday, the attorney called. He wanted to talk. Terms, not lawsuits. That's when I knew I'd already won. The following Monday, the negotiation began. Dad didn't come himself. He sent the company attorney, some guy named Reese, who wore a suit 2 sizes too expensive for a guy repping a family-run machine shop that just realized it had been pirating its own son's inventions. We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between the office and my condo. I wore jeans and a hoodie. He wore cufflinks and a frown. "Let's be real, Mr. Thornwell. You're not looking for fair compensation. You're trying to blow up the company your father built." I took a sip of coffee. "Actually, I'm trying to build the company my father built. For a decade of unpaid intellectual property use." He laid out the pitch. 5%. Temporary. Maybe renegotiated later. I laid out my leverage. The numbers. 42 patents. 78% of annual revenue tied to those products. 35% from the RS7 sorting arm alone. $7,500 per unit, 200 units a year. All mine. And if Thornwell Dynamics didn't want to pay, that was fine. Because I had an offer from Hollis Tech, one of our top competitors, for a non-exclusive license and a lead R&D role. They'd even cover litigation fees if Thornwell tried to fight me. "You'd sell your designs to our competition?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I own the designs. I'm not selling anything that isn't mine." He sat there quiet for a full minute, then said the quiet part out loud. "If you go public with this, Warren's reputation is gone. The family name, the legacy, it'll be destroyed." I nodded. "That's not my fault. That's the consequence of building your empire on free labor and bad paperwork." We settled on 10% of gross revenue from patented products, a 5-year licensing deal, quarterly payments, and a clause allowing me to license to other companies if I wanted. They had no leverage. I walked out with a contract worth $320,000 annually plus back payments. Dad signed it last. No eye contact. "Cameron, sorry." Darren tried to skip the signing. He showed up late, looking like he hadn't slept in a week, dropped his pen, and cursed under his breath when he saw the payment schedule. That first direct deposit hit 6 weeks later. 6 figures. My bank app lit up like it had just seen the face of God. And suddenly, I wasn't just the engineer. I was the guy licensing the machines everyone else relied on. I was done being overlooked. And I was just getting started. 3 months in, things got real interesting. See, Darren thought freezing me out of meetings would punish me. Like if I wasn't included in executive strategy calls, I'd come crawling back with blueprints in hand. Instead, I showed up, did my job, got paid my salary plus $80,000 per quarter in patent licensing. And every week, I spent my evenings on the phone with competitors. Because that licensing deal? Non-exclusive. Hollis Tech was just the beginning. Within weeks, I signed 2 more companies to similar agreements. Smaller firms, yes, but they were nimble, aggressive, and thrilled to offer 15% to get their hands on bleeding-edge equipment without the R&D bill. Meanwhile, Thornwell's clients began noticing something strange. Hollis started offering our patented sorting arms, the modular conveyor systems, the vibration mounts. Same features. Same benefits. Better customer service. One by one, they started to leave. Slowly, at first. Then like a drain being pulled. Quarter 2, Thornwell's revenue dropped 18%. Quarter 3, another 14%. Darren tried to pivot. Held internal meetings about innovative reinvention. Tried to fast-track new products through the junior engineering team. Problem? The kids didn't know how the systems worked. They were just copying. Iterating. They didn't know why I designed things the way I did. They couldn't replicate the logic. The insight. The field research behind every design. They were assembling parts. I was solving problems. Clients noticed. And bailed. Meanwhile, I was hiring. Hollis gave me full creative control of their R&D team. I poached 2 of our top junior techs with 50% raises and better hours. They jumped ship in a heartbeat. Back at Thornwell, Darren started issuing memos about cost-saving austerity measures. First-class flights? Gone. Company retreats? Gone. His assistant? Reassigned to sales. The espresso machine? Still there. Glaring. But no one used it anymore. The floor workers could feel it. The sales team started sending out resumes. My phone buzzed daily with ex-Thornwell staffers asking if I was hiring. By the end of the year, I was pulling in over $600,000 a year, half salary, half licensing. And Darren? Was hosting morale-boosting lunches with lukewarm Costco wraps and budget brand soda. The guy who used to call me just the engineer was now bleeding out in a chair that used to be my dad's. And we were only in the 3rd act. The death spiral picked up speed. Darren tried everything: discounts, partnerships, even a half-baked rebrand. Changed the logo, swapped Thornwell Dynamics for Thornwell Solutions. Like slapping a fresh coat of paint on a crumbling barn. Nobody cared. Because the problem wasn't the name. It was that their entire product line was built on patents they didn't own. And every month, they paid me to remind them of it. One of their oldest clients, a legacy logistics firm we'd supplied for 20 years, moved their entire operation to Hollis. I got a congratulatory call from their VP. "We loved your work at Thornwell. Glad we can finally deal with you directly." Every deal they lost, every client they fumbled, I gained. Because I wasn't just an engineer anymore, I was a brand. The name on the patents. The name on the brochures. The guy people trusted when they needed something that worked. Inside Thornwell, morale cracked. Blake from sales left to join a startup. 2 department leads retired early. I heard Darren even tried to convince Dad to come out of retirement. Just to steady the ship? Dad refused. His health had deteriorated. The stress was catching up. And every time he looked at me, he saw the moment he realized he'd given the company away to the wrong son. One Tuesday afternoon I got a call. From Darren. I let it go to voicemail. Then he emailed me. The subject line: "Let's talk." Attached was a proposal. An offer to buy me out of my patent rights. 7 figures. Half up front, half in shares. I read it. Then reread it. Then laughed because the fine print was the best part. The shares were in Thornwell Solutions. The same company I was watching slowly rot from the inside out. I sent one sentence back. "You don't get to buy your way out of disrespect." Then I called my lawyer and greenlit something I'd been sitting on for months. An exclusive licensing deal with Hollis Tech, effective immediately. Thornwell would have 60 days to cease all use of my patented products or face litigation. And just like that, the clock started ticking. Thornwell Solutions had 60 days to live. The exclusive deal with Hollis Tech changed everything. They were now the only company in North America licensed to produce my patented products. Which meant Thornwell was officially cut off. No more RS7 sorting arm. No more modular conveyor junctions. No more smart monitoring arrays, auto-lube systems, filter housings, vibration mounts, nothing. I didn't call Darren to explain. I let the legal notification do it for me. Certified mail. Signed receipt. Enforced by a cease and desist letter drafted so sharply the envelope probably hissed. I expected a call. I got silence. 3 days later, word got out. A supplier leaked the news, probably during a boozy lunch with someone from Hollis. I don't know. But suddenly, everyone knew Thornwell was about to lose their best-selling products. Clients started calling. Panicked. Are you still shipping our S7S? Is this true about the patents? Should we cancel our order and go to Hollis? By week 2, I got the first furious message from Blake, the ex-sales director who jumped ship. What the hell happened over there? Darren's imploding. Clients are bailing. You just shut off the tap. Yup. Sure did. I heard Darren tried to spin it. Said I'd blindsided them. Claimed I'd sabotaged the company out of spite. But the people who'd worked with me knew the truth. They knew the backstory. The years of being sidelined. The ignored warnings. The boilerplate contract. The patents filed in plain sight. Darren didn't get blindsided. He got outplayed. Dad called me. His voice was small. Tired. Broken in places. Gavin, can we meet? We sat in the same break room where he used to hand me assignments on grease-stained clipboards. He looked older than I remembered. His hands shook when he picked up the mug. I made a mistake. I let him speak. He talked about legacy, pride, family, how he thought Darren had the leadership, how he assumed I'd always be there, working in the background. I never realized what I built was standing on your shoulders. He asked what it would take to fix it. I didn't answer. Because it was already too late. 30 days before Thornwell's exclusive use deadline expired, they announced a pivot. Darren held a town hall with what was left of the company staff, maybe 50 people by that point, and stood under a flickering fluorescent light delivering a speech that might have worked if it wasn't completely hollow. We're entering a new era of innovation. New products. Fresh vision. Translation: we're out of usable designs, and the guy who built our catalog just locked the door. I watched the footage. Someone had filmed it on a phone and sent it to me anonymously. Darren looked thinner. Tired. Desperate in that way people look when they realize the money stopped showing up automatically. I didn't gloat. Not because I'm noble. But because it was already over. He just hadn't admitted it yet. Day 59, I got an email from Thornwell's legal rep. They were ceasing use of all patented products effective immediately. There was no apology. No acknowledgement. Just a dry statement confirming they were pulling everything off the line. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Revenue had plummeted 40% in 6 months. A skeleton crew remained. Half the machines were mothballed. Their largest clients had all signed with Hollis or one of my other licensees. There was no recovery. No bailout. No brand left to save. A private equity firm scooped up what was left, just a warehouse, some outdated equipment, and a logo no one trusted anymore. Darren? Gone. Last I heard, he took a mid-level sales job at a packaging company. Told people he was between ventures. Dead? Retired finally? Quietly. No Chamber of Commerce farewell. No Rotary Club speech. Just a man who bet on the wrong son, and lost the company he spent 40 years building. Me? Still collecting quarterly licensing checks. Still running R&D at Hollis. Still designing the future while they tried to salvage the past. But even then, I knew there was still one conversation left to have. And it came exactly 1 year after the day Darren was named CEO. Dad called me on a Tuesday. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not frail, just hollow. Like he'd finally emptied out all the pride and was sitting in the echo. I'm sorry, he said. That was it. No big speech. No preamble. Just 3 words I'd waited a lifetime to hear and now didn't even need. We met at a coffee shop near the industrial park. The same one where I used to pick up caffeine during prototype marathons. He looked like he hadn't shaved in days. Wore the old Thornwell fleece with the logo half peeled off. I know it's too late, he said, eyes fixed on the table. But I needed you to hear it. You were right. I didn't protect you. I didn't protect the company. I nodded. I didn't need a promotion, Dad. I needed respect. You handed Darren the crown without asking if he could carry it. You gave him credit for what I built. That's not just unfair. That's dangerous. He winced, but didn't deny it. He was charming. Confident. I thought that's what a leader looked like. And I was quiet. Covered in metal dust. Easy to overlook. Silence. I thought we were building this together, he said finally. But I never really invited you to the table. I took a breath. Let it sit for a second. I was at the table, Dad. You just never looked in my direction. He nodded slowly. Eyes glossy now. No excuses. No defenses. Just a man who finally realized he'd spent his whole life backing the wrong blueprint. Is there any chance you'd come back? Help rebuild? I smiled. Not cruel. Not smug. Just tired. I already built something. I'm not coming back to fix what you chose to break. He swallowed hard. Didn't argue. You were the foundation, he whispered. And I didn't even notice until the roof caved in. I stood to leave. On the way out, I placed something on the table, a copy of the first patent I ever filed. The one for the RS-7 sorting arm. Frame it, I said. That's what saved the company for as long as it lived. Then I walked out, and this time, I didn't look back. 3 months later, Thornwell was a memory. The building was gutted. The signage was gone. The parking lot where I used to eat lunch in my car now belonged to a logistics startup that didn't even make anything. They just moved other people's stuff around and called it innovation. Funny how that works. I visited once. Quietly. Pulled up, sat across the street, coffee in hand. Watched as a new company's crew hauled out old machines I helped install. It should have felt like a funeral. But honestly, it felt like closure. My life had moved on. Hollis had expanded twice. I was now head of advanced systems development, with a team of 15 and an R&D budget that made my old paycheck look like a typo. I licensed a new system to a German firm, 25% revenue share, non-exclusive. That deal alone would pay for a house in cash and leave enough left over for a cabin in Vermont if I wanted it. But the truth was, I didn't want anything fancy. Just space. Quiet. And time to think. I rented a small place in the countryside, put a drafting table in front of the window, and started working on something new. Not for Thornwell. Not for Hollis. For me. No clock to punch. No spotlight to chase. Just ideas and freedom. Sometimes I'd get texts from former coworkers. Hey man. Just wanted to say, we should have had your back sooner. I always knew you were the one keeping the place alive. Hope you're doing okay. I was doing better than okay. I was finally seen, not because I demanded it, but because I built something so unignorable, they had no choice. And now? I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was choosing what mattered. 6 months after Thornwell collapsed, I got an invitation. Cream-colored envelope. Heavy cardstock. Embossed gold trim. It was from Darren. At first, I thought it was a joke. I half expected glitter to explode out of it or for it to say, "Hope you're enjoying my downfall, traitor." But no. It was a wedding invitation. Apparently, he was getting married to someone named Brooke. No mention of a +1. No personal note. Just a date, a venue, and the eerie confidence that I'd want to attend. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to laugh, burn it, or send it back with a licensing invoice inside. Instead, I threw it in a drawer and drove out to see someone else, Mom. She and Dad had separated shortly after the bankruptcy. Not a loud divorce, just a quiet split. Too many cracks in the foundation, too much time spent pretending things were fine. She'd moved to a little townhouse in a retirement community with a garden and water aerobics on Tuesdays. We had tea. Sat on her porch. Talked like people do when there's finally room to say what they mean. I didn't know how to help you, she said. You were always so capable. I didn't realize being strong meant you still needed support. I let that sit. It didn't sting. Not anymore. She asked if I was going to Darren's wedding. I shook my head. Letting go doesn't mean showing up for people who only call when they want a witness. She nodded. No argument. No guilt trip. Just a quiet acceptance, the kind that only comes after you've seen the storm pass and finally stopped trying to drag the broken walls back upright. That night, I went home and did something small, but important. I shredded the invitation. Then I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and started sketching a new design. Not for a product. Not for a business. For a life that was finally, undeniably mine. About a year after the collapse, I got a package. No return address, but the handwriting on the label was unmistakably Dad's sharp, mechanical, all caps like a blueprint note. Inside was a box wrapped in a folded piece of oil-stained cloth. I thought it might be a mistake. Or guilt. But it wasn't either. Unwrapped, it revealed an old wrench. Not a new one. Not engraved. Just the same battered 15mm Dad used back in the shop when I was a kid. I recognized it instantly. There was a nick on the handle from the time I dropped it into a sump tank and tried to fish it out with a magnet. Beneath the wrench was a note, written on graph paper in pencil. You built things I never could. I taught you how to tighten bolts. You taught me what I missed. W. That was all. No signature. No plea. No ask for forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. It didn't change anything. But it said something he never said with words. He finally saw me. I hung the wrench above my desk. Not as a trophy. Not as a grudge. As a reminder. That tools in the wrong hands build empires that collapse. But tools in the right hands? They build freedom. 1 year and 4 months after Thornwell's collapse, I got a call I never expected from Victor, the shop floor supervisor who'd once told me, half joking, that engineers were just mathy guys who never got dirty. Victor had stayed through the fall. He'd watched Aaron's era rot from the inside. He'd watched the orders vanish, the layoffs roll in, the machines sit silent under tarps. Gav, he said, voice gravelly, the place is a damn tomb. Thought you should know they're auctioning the shop. Whole facility. Equipment. Everything. I didn't say anything. There's something there you might want. Locker 19. Third shelf. Click. I didn't ask questions. Just drove. The building was cold, half-lit, echoey in a way that made your bones feel like tuning forks. The auctioneer's signs were already posted. Machines wore price tags. Workbenches had been taped off like murder scenes. I walked straight to the locker. Inside? My first prototype. The original RS-7 sorting arm. The one with mismatched screws and burn marks from the time the solenoid fried and melted part of the wiring. Next to it was a shoebox labeled, Gavin, do not toss. Inside the box? My old notebooks. Designs drawn in ink and coffee stains. Margins filled with frustration, scribbled ideas, diagrams sketched during 3 a.m. breakthroughs. And under all that, Dad's pocket watch. The one he used to check when he said things like, 5 more minutes, then we're done. But stayed until the job was finished. The one I hadn't seen in years. It was cracked. Not broken. Just worn. I stood there, alone in the dim storage room, holding 10 years of my life in a cardboard box. Not for revenge. Not for ego. Just to remember. I was here. I mattered. And I built something that lasted longer than the men who tried to steal it. I bought the locker and everything inside for $12. $12 to reclaim my origin story. When I got home, I unpacked the notebooks, the prototype, the watch, and lined them up on a shelf in my workshop. Not framed. Not flashy. Just present. Proof. The next day, I flew to Chicago. Hollis was expanding again, partnering with a clean energy firm for a project involving robotic turbine assembly. They wanted me in the room. Not as an engineer. As a founder. They were spinning up a new subsidiary. My designs would anchor it. And they wanted me to lead the entire division. Full ownership stake. My name on the masthead. We inked the deal that Friday. It came with equity. Voting power. And something no one at Thornwell ever thought to give me. Authority. Not because of my last name. But because of my work. And when I walked into the new facility, clean and humming with possibility, someone had already installed a brass nameplate on the R&D office door. Gavin Thornwell. Chief Innovation Officer. It took me a second to realize I wasn't furious anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had already won. 2 years post-collapse, I gave a keynote at the National Manufacturing Innovation Conference in San Diego. Big room. Tiered seats. Lanyards and branded notebooks and the kind of lighting that makes everyone look important. My name was printed on a banner behind the podium, right next to the words. Keynote speaker, Gavin Thornwell. Disrupting legacy innovation as inheritance. I almost laughed when I saw it. There were 200 people in the audience. Engineers. Executives. Startups. Suits. Safety vests. A sea of people who used to ignore me unless something broke. I walked out in jeans and a black button-down. No slides. Just a wireless mic and a story. And I told it. Not the sanitized version. The real one. How I designed 42 products from scratch. How my patents were ignored until I enforced them. How my own father handed the business to someone else because he didn't understand that innovation is the business. And how a company that refused to value its builder collapsed under the weight of its own denial. And then I said the part that made the room go silent. We treat engineers like tools. Resources. Background noise. But if you build your entire company on someone's back, you better know whose name is on the spine. I got a standing ovation. One guy in the third row even shouted, "Hell yes!" and fist pumped like we were at a rock concert, not a manufacturing summit. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand. Not to offer jobs. Not to pitch. Just to say, "You made me feel seen." A younger engineer with ink-stained fingers and a nervous smile handed me a notebook and said, "You reminded me why I started." I signed it. At the end of the day, I sat outside with a beer and watched the sun sink into the Pacific. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "You were right. I wasn't ready. But I think you were always meant to lead. Darren." I stared at it for a moment. Then deleted it. Not out of bitterness. But because I didn't need it anymore. He finally said it. And I didn't need to say anything back. 6 months after that conference, I made a decision. I stepped down from my role at Hollis. Not because I was burned out. Not because I was angry. Not even because of the money. God knows I had more than enough now. I stepped down because I'd finally built what I set out to build, a legacy that didn't need my name to survive it. The team was strong. The patents were protected. My systems were in everything from clean energy robotics to vertical farming operations. The company's value had tripled since I joined, and my stake in it could pay for the next 3 generations of Thornwells if I had any, which I didn't. Instead, I bought a warehouse. An old one. Rusted steel roof, cracked concrete floors, pigeons in the rafters, vines trying to reclaim the west wall. The kind of place people would walk past and think, condemned, not vision. Perfect. I gutted it. Rewired it. Rebuilt it with the same hands that used to scrape by building prototypes on salvaged parts. No board of directors. No team of investors. Just me, a blueprint in pencil, and a playlist full of angry rock from my underappreciated years. What I was building wasn't a company. It was a lab. Not the kind you tour in a blazer. The kind where problems get solved at 2 a.m., with welders and whiteboards and curse words. A place where the next generation of problem solvers could come in, pitch something wild, and actually build it. I called it proof. Because that's all I ever wanted to be. Proof that you could be the quiet one. The overlooked one. The one in the back room doing the work no one noticed and still walk out with everything that mattered. Proof that the smartest guy in the room doesn't have to be the loudest. Proof that legacy isn't passed down, it's built. Now, engineers from all over apply to work at Proof. Not to chase a title. Not for stock options. To invent. To fix what other people gave up on. To matter. I fund it entirely. No strings. No equity demands. Just support, mentorship, and space. I show up 3 days a week. I teach. I listen. I share the stories behind the patents. The real ones, the mistakes, the late nights, the doubt. I watch their faces when they realize their ideas aren't crazy. Just early. And once a month, I host something I call Back Shop, a roundtable where we sit in folding chairs, eat takeout, and talk about the stuff no one puts in the marketing deck. Burnout. Imposter syndrome. Bad bosses. Family that doesn't get it. Companies that took and never said thank you. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we laugh so hard we can't breathe. But always we build. And every person who comes through the doors of Proof sees the same thing hanging on the main wall. A framed photo. It's me. Covered in oil. Holding the first RS-7 prototype. Exhausted. Unshaven. Grinning like a lunatic. Below it, engraved on a steel plate. This is what the guy who didn't have what it takes looks like. 2.5 years after I walked out of the Thornwell shop floor with nothing but a folder full of patents and a bruised sense of belonging, I got an email from MIT. Subject line. Commencement invitation, honorary recognition consideration. I read it 3 times. Thought it was spam. Check the address. Nope, real. They were inviting me to speak at their engineering graduation. Not just as a guest. As an honorary inductee into their Inventors Hall, for impact on industrial innovation and independent systems design. I stared at the screen and actually whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." Then I laughed. Not out of disbelief, but out of clarity. That little voice in my head that used to ask if I was good enough? Dead quiet now. I said yes. 2 months later, I stood in front of 600 future engineers in a black robe I never wore the first time around. They handed me a plaque, said my name with a kind of reverence that didn't feel like it belonged to someone who used to be the quiet son, or just the guy in the back. And when I stepped up to the mic, I didn't talk about money, or titles, or payback. I talked about how you protect your ideas, how you build even when no one's watching, how family isn't always your team, and how betrayal, when processed properly, becomes fuel, and how you don't need a corner office to make the room revolve around you. You just need to build something so strong, so unignorable it outlasts the people who never believed in it. Later that week, I flew home. Not to the city. Not to Hollis HQ. Home. The place where all of this started, my parents' old house. The one they'd moved back into after retiring. Smaller. Quieter. No company to run. No brothers to feud over. Just 2 people in their 70s finally learning how to enjoy slow mornings and soft conversations. I knocked once and let myself in. Dad was in the kitchen making tea. No words. Just a nod. I held up the plaque and set it gently on the counter. He stared at it for a long time. Then, finally, said the thing that actually mattered. "I don't deserve credit. But I'm proud anyway." I sat down. No speeches. No victory lap. Just quiet. We drank tea in silence. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was holding back to keep the peace. It felt like peace had finally come on its own. By the 3rd year, something unexpected started happening. People began reaching out not to license my patents, not to hire me, not even to interview me. They reached out to ask how I did it. Not the technical part. The personal part. How do you go from the overlooked son in a grease-stained hoodie to the guy whose signature changes the direction of an entire company? How do you rebuild your name after your own father chose someone else to carry it forward? How do you burn down your old identity and not come out bitter? I didn't have a short answer. So I started writing. Not a memoir. Not a business book. Nothing with dust jacket praise from CEOs who wouldn't last a week on the shop floor. I wrote a manual. Not for engineers, though there was plenty of tech in it, but for builders of all kinds. The kind who dream in blueprints. The kind who fight to be heard without raising their voice. The kind who spend more time getting it right than getting credit. The kind I used to be. The kind I still am. I called it Design. What you build will save you. It wasn't flashy. I published it through a small independent press run by another ex-corporate burnout who now ran a letterpress shop out of Oregon. No agent. No hype train. And yet word spread. Engineers read it. Then startup founders. Then professors. Then burnout managers. Then kids fresh out of school who were trying to decide if they were crazy, or just early. Within 6 months, it was a quiet cult classic in every hard-tech R&D lab from Boston to Berlin. I got handwritten letters. One from a kid in Mumbai who built a solar-powered grain sifter based on one of my old patents. Another from a machinist in Nebraska who quit his job after reading Chapter 4 and started designing ergonomic tools for people with arthritis, because his dad couldn't grip a wrench anymore. One from a high school robotics team that etched a quote from page 212 onto the side of their competition bot. Solve the right problem. Even if nobody's asking you to. I didn't write back to all of them. But I kept every letter. Every note. Every scrawled blueprint on grid paper signed. You showed me it was possible. Because this was legacy. Not inheritance. Then came the call that stopped me cold. The new CEO at Hollis, smart guy, ex-DOE, ran on solar panels, and Espresso wanted to name the new R&D wing after me. I told him I'd think about it. Instead, I drove out to the warehouse. Not Hollis. Proof. My space. My rules. No board. No shareholders. Just whiteboards, welders, and people who still believed in trying weird things until they worked. I stood in the middle of the lab and watched a 24-year-old woman from Mexico City teach a 19-year-old former mechanic from Detroit how to prototype a climate-resilient irrigation system using parts that cost less than a pizza. And I thought, why would I ever need my name on a building when it's already in the work? That night, I wrote one sentence on the chalkboard at Proof. Your story is the IP no one can steal. And I left it there. No signature. Didn't need one. By year 4, the calls weren't just coming from startups and think tanks. They were coming from governments. Small ones at first. Then cities. Then federal agencies. Not asking for my patents, not directly. They were asking for systems. Could we adapt the sorting arm tech for post-disaster supply chains? Could my modular conveyor framework be used in agricultural co-ops and drought zones? Could we design low-cost, low-maintenance automation for hospitals running on backup power in remote villages? I said yes. Then I said, you don't need my company. You need my people. And I built a new wing at Proof. We called it Field Design, part skunkworks, part humanitarian engineering, all heart. I staffed it with former underdogs, the overlooked, the too weird for LinkedIn crew. And together, we built solutions no Fortune 500 would have greenlit. Our lab didn't win awards. It won results. In Kenya, our turbine-based grain transport system cut local farmer losses by 38%. In Louisiana, a modular waste sorting conveyor adapted for flood cleanup saved a town $3 million in cleanup costs. In Montana, a retired military mechanic used our tech to design an autonomous livestock feeder that worked off-grid for 8 weeks. None of this made headlines. But every few weeks, someone from that world would send me a photo. A kid holding a wrench I helped design. A woman using a machine that used to be too expensive, until we made it not. A man standing next to a crate marked Proof Engineering, built for where you are. That slogan? Not from marketing. It came from a 23-year-old technician who was the first in his family to finish college. He wrote it in Sharpa on a crate bound for a refugee camp in Jordan. We kept it. We printed it on every package, every schematic, every box of parts we shipped out into the world. Because that was the whole point. Not recognition. Not revenge. Not even redemption. Reach. We weren't fixing companies anymore. We were fixing systems. And one day, standing in the middle of Proof, surrounded by humming machines and half-eaten burritos and a team of people I'd trust with my life, I realized something. The old voice, the one that used to whisper you're not enough? It was gone. Not quiet. Gone. For years, 3 labs, and 42 licensed designs later, I sat alone on the roof of the Proof warehouse, watching the sky bleed orange over rows of solar panels we'd installed last fall. No audience. No plaque. Just a clipboard full of notes, and a thermos of black coffee. I thought about Dad. About Darren. About the version of me who used to live for quiet approval that never came. And I thought about the last time I saw the Thornwell name in the wild. It was on a rusted panel at a scrapyard in RS7 prototype, stripped for parts, a machine that once paid for everything. I didn't feel grief. I felt clarity. Legacy isn't what carries your name. It's what carries forward without it. Proof didn't need me in every meeting anymore. Our engineers were running teams. Our designs were solving real-world problems I'd never even imagined. I'd become the blueprint, not the bottleneck. Before I left the roof that night, I wrote one last note on the whiteboard. They said I didn't have what it takes. Turns out, I was what it takes. And I walked downstairs into the hum of a machine shop that never needed a throne, just someone willing to build.